this is a test for me, see if this is compelling for anyone. But I'm gonna be doing. My name's Aaron. I'm a artist and illustrator and cartoonist. I like to draw. I like to paint. I do all sorts of different things. I'm going to be starting some office hours at Olyphant Art Supply, and basically I'm going to be there to answer any questions that people might have about like starting projects, or if you're stuck on a project, or if you don't know how to improve at something. Sort of this open-ended place for people to come and ask questions and get some answers from a professional artist, which is what I am. I'm going to show some work and maybe do a little demo, talk a little bit about how I start my days of work, how I try and think in creative ways and creative problem solving, and how I kind of like practice and just like stay in the process of drawing. So I have the sketchbook, which you can hopefully see from the camera that's over here. This is a bunch of different warm-ups that I've done. Just, you know, these are like the dates on them. I'll basically just grab a piece of reference that I find compelling. Lots of humans, lots of portraits. These are all done with this pen or some version of this pen, which is a Tombow food. I'm not gonna say the name because I'm gonna mispronounce it, but maybe if you come in, I can answer the question. So, anyways, a bunch of different work, some invented stuff, some made up stuff. Mostly, this is done from reference. Some embellishments around reference. But just trying to get my hands moving, sort of get myself into the headspace of creating and observing. And I try and do at least like one of these every single day that I start work, just to loosen up, but also it becomes this really interesting record of the things that I've gravitated towards. And I just like love keeping sketchbooks. I have a bunch of different sketchbooks with lots of different purposes for each one. This one, the toned paper, I really like. I use this kind of like whiteout around it, often to kind of make things pop. But filling up sketchbooks is something that I just totally love to do. There's something really magical about, you know, both seeing other people's sketchbooks and seeing how people think through problems, or just like the beginning of an idea, to me, is almost more exciting than the finished product. It's sort of got this like raw state that I really love. And then you also get this really interesting sort of journey of time, of you drawing. If you're the type of person who goes in sequential order, because I know not everybody does that. I like to do from start to finish. I used to have a really hard time when I was younger with tearing pages out of my sketchbook, because I would draw things I didn't like, so I would tear them out. I had those like ringed binder ones, and I got in the habit of, because I would always tear them out, I started buying the ones that you can't tear out unless you want to like cut the page out, which I have definitely done. But it forced me to sort of keep a record of things that even if I didn't like a drawing at the time, it was still in there. And often when you come back to drawings that you maybe didn't like, you find that you enjoy them a lot more than you did originally. A lot of it has to do with where you're at, just like emotionally, I think, when you draw. Sometimes I think I make a drawing that is one of the most incredible drawings I've ever made, and then I come back to it and I'm like, no, it's good, and vice versa. So yeah, lots of drawing. I love to draw. I do it all the time. If there's a recipe for getting good at drawing, it's basically just be obsessed with it. There's lots of other ways of getting good at drawing within the obsession, but I think obsession really helps to guide you through improving and wanting to draw. Okay, so I am going to get to a place. Let's go for this page. A lot of these ones that have the thinner lines are actually done with like nib pens, like dip pens. I'm going to use this one just for the ease of doing it. So I'm going to start here. I pulled up some reference of kind of this cool older guy holding a staff, we're gonna see if I can draw it in a way that, it doesn't have to be accurate exactly to what I'm seeing, but I like it to be look in some way interesting, to me at least. Something that I would be somewhat proud to share at least. So I'm going in and I'm thinking about sort of all the bigger pictures and a few details, but I'm finding the head and roughly where the rib cage sits on this figure, and then kind of where the hips come out here in the torso. He's got this kind of wrap around him. So it's always good to think about, I often feel like I see people, I'll watch videos of the great wizards of drawing, and I feel like I often see people just kind of, they just start and they kind of just make an incredible drawing from where they start, and maybe that looks like what I'm doing here. I flatter myself. But there's all of this knowledge that goes into like the bigger forms, trying to really think about negative space, the space in between, the positive spaces, the relationships between how far away things are from other things, if you're doing observational stuff. Proportion, I can tell I might have made his head a little too big. But trying to figure out where those big shapes are. Like, I'm not drawing the hand, I'm just drawing a little square to represent where the hand is. I'm not worried about muscles per se, I'm just worrying about the curve of the arm and where it ends up over here. And then I'm just going to draw a little indication for where that's going to be, and I'll worry about it later. It's there enough for me to come back to it. This cool staff comes up to about here. Actually realizing right now that this reference is AI modified, which I don't have a problem with using AI modified or AI made reference personally. I love to draw, so I would never use it as a finished product. It seems cheap and, I don't know, lacks depth, I suppose. But that's because I also love to draw. Like, I'm not in it for the finished product. I'm in it for the journey. Although I'd love to have a finished product that I like, but getting there is much more important than what the results are, I think. Or at least in an ideal world. So yeah, I'm putting probably a little too much detail into this before I get to the bottom, but to also always keep in mind that this is just like a warm-up. I'm not trying to make amazing stuff. Doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get my hands moving, me thinking about relationships, some amount of anatomy, maybe about lights and darks, where I want my lights and darks to sit. You can even tell he's probably a little shorter than he would be. One thing I actually find in some ways nice about using AI as reference is me copying it and changing it is not like I'm copying someone else's art. I'm sort of using something that exists that nobody made and then making something of my own out of it, which I think is kind of, I don't know, if you want to spin it in a positive way. It's becoming mine through me putting it through my hands, and maybe I'll get some cool idea from it. All right, so I think his head might be a little too bulbous. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. So I have sort of a little bit of a, I would say the bones of what I need for a finished drawing here. I might finish the staff. It comes down a little bit more to there. I've got roughly where all the things are placed, probably more information in the wrap than I necessarily need, but that's okay. And so now I'm kind of going to go in there and do another pass. A lot of making finished work is about doing multiple passes. It's like knowing when you can, how to abbreviate stuff at the beginning, and then what to focus on as you zero in. You can sort of see I have this painting behind me. It's a portrait commission, and it's at the stage now where it's all blocked in, all the color is on there, all the paint, the surface is covered, which is like 80% of the work. But then it's all of this kind of fine tuning to sort of like move, where's the eye exactly going to sit, what are the details that need to like really bring this person to life. And while a lot of the time people focus on the details too early, and then you kind of miss the fundamental shapes. So if you're the type of person who loves details, I would say that it probably means that you need to slow down and look at the bigger shapes a little bit more before you get to those details, and then you get to just kind of relax into details and eat them all up once you have your bigger structure in place. It makes it a lot easier to make things you're happy with. I say this from someone who was really obsessed with details and would do them too early and not have enough structure. And now I think I'm almost like the reverse. Like I enjoy the process of getting the big picture in more than I enjoy doing the details. But it's also, doing the details is, in some ways it's sort of just like putting icing on the cake. Like the cake is already baked, the structure's already there, the measuring has sort of already been done. I'm just sort of adding the toppings. Just trying to get some of this musculature in. I like this, I like to do a lot of hatching in how I draw. I've had people have asked me like how do I approach it? And I have a lot of answers for how I approach things. There's a lot of ways that I think that I've trained myself to think in certain ways. But for whatever reason, with choosing where I choose to make a particular set of lines or what direction, kind of just feel it out, and hope for the best, which is, I know, very unhelpful. But yeah, we could probably come into the shop. Maybe we can get to the bottom of it if you're interested. All right, so this character is sort of starting to come to life a little bit more. There's a lot more dark in this wrap, and something that comic artists often do, like if you're penciling something in that's going to be ink later, is you kind of map out where the lines of the dark is going to go, and you put these little X's in there. I'm not going to put those X's in because I think they're going to distract from my drawing. I might have done it when I was doing pencil stuff, but I'm just trying to find the edge of where the dark is, the darkest dark, or just like most of the dark. And then once I have that, I'll be like, okay, so now I can fill in all of this area with lines. And once it's all filled in, I can, if I want to, I can bring out some of the deeper darks in there. But this is just a sketch, so I don't know how like dark I'm gonna go. Really like in the reference, the feet are like very much in shadow. So I want to make sure that those darks really stand out. So I just like how that looks. This is kind of cool, like cracked. No, actually that's his foot. Oh well. Alright, you can see I'm avoiding the face. So maybe I don't want to mess it up, but we'll see what happens when we get there. So yeah, then we have this slightly lighter zone here. Probably push these darks a little more if I wanted to, but I don't know. It's got this cool kind of design or something up here. All right, and then let's see. So I see a lot of shade shadow shapes on the face, and I could approach it where I'm just really trying to find the shadow shapes, or I could try and find sort of where the features sit first and indicate those, and then put my shadow shapes around them. So I'm going to do something in between. There's these very dark eyes that are kind of pitted, I guess. Let's see, there's a shadow that goes there, and this half of his head is all in shadow. So then I'm going to just throw in a bunch of shadow here and here. And that gets the sense of his head enough, at least. And his eyes are even darker, so I'm going to make the eyes a little bit darker there. He's got this kind of interesting, like, brow crease, which ages him up a little bit. Kind of give him a little more age in mind, so he feels a little more wise. And that's like more or less done. To punch it up, let me just see if there's any other darks I want to add. A little shadow there. This shadow comes down here. Any other big ones that I'm missing? You can see his collarbone a little bit more there, which is kind of nice. Maybe some more of his ribs, just give him sort of that emaciated quality. Actually, I don't know if those ribs, those might be just muscles across the chest. So yeah, that's looking good. And then what I'm going to do to finish it, I don't always do this, but for the sake of this one, I'm going to give it a little outline in white. I love these little white out pens. I'm always sort of disappointed in, whenever I've ever gotten paint pens, they're just never this opaque. I want like real opaque stuff, but everybody gets to decide on what they like. Maybe paint pens are your jams. Okay. So we're almost done here. So like I said, this is sort of my process for warming up in the mornings before I start my day of work, whether that's like working on portrait stuff or doing illustrations for a shirt or a book or something, or if I'm just working on my own projects. I always start with something observational to get my hand and my brain sort of thinking. And sometimes that can lead to some really interesting ideas. It can also sometimes lead to getting really distracted and not focusing on your work. And then you go off on some tangent of interesting thing, which it can be challenging, but also I think it's kind of the point in a lot of ways of being an artist, is to sort of follow those whims of interest and see where they take you. Even if it doesn't feel like it's necessarily like productive, it can be really helpful to kind of let yourself do that. Saying that as I struggle with that concept. So that's my drawing. I don't always, but I often will date them. I find like looking back on, I have just stacks and stacks of sketchbooks, and a lot of them I did not keep very good dates because I was just like, I'll remember, but as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh, it's really helpful to sort of date stamp stuff. So what's the date today? That is a good question. I think it's the 7th. Maybe it's the 8th? I think it's the 8th. All right, let's see. So 1, 8, 26. All right, so that's my demo. Hopefully that was informative. I'll probably do another little demo of me drawing stuff from my imagination and sort of how my process works for that. I have a whole other sketchbook that's primarily dedicated to that, or maybe even more than one. And I'll do a little video about that later. Thanks for checking it out. Bye. Oh, come in the shop. I don't know what days yet, but it'll probably be in the description.